The call came on a Tuesday morning, right when I was in the middle of a double shift at the clinic. My phone buzzed against the counter 3 times before I could even reach it. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost kept moving, kept pretending that whatever was on the other end of that line was someone else's problem. But something stopped me, some instinct that only mothers have, that quiet, bone-deep alarm that goes off before your brain even processes the sound. I picked up. "Is this Claire Hartwell?" "Yes." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "This is Dr. Anita Osei at Riverside General. I'm calling regarding your son Noah. He's been admitted to our emergency department. Are you able to come in?" The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the counter. "What happened?" "Is he okay? Is he's stable right now? But I need you here, Ms. Hartwell, as soon as possible." I didn't remember grabbing my keys. I didn't remember telling my supervisor I had to leave. One moment I was standing in the break room, and the next I was running red lights on the highway, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, replaying the last time I had seen my son's face. That had been 14 months ago. 14 months since a family court judge in a small courtroom in Dayton, Ohio, handed full custody of my 7-year-old son to my ex-husband, Marcus, and told me I could have supervised visits every other Saturday 2 hours, a social worker present, no exceptions. 14 months since Marcus stood beside his attorney with that calm, practiced expression he always wore when he knew he had already won. 14 months since I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward and couldn't stop shaking long enough to drive home. The paperwork said I was unstable. That was the word Marcus's attorney kept using. Unstable. Prone to emotional episodes. A flight risk. They submitted a report from a psychologist I had seen exactly once, a man named Dr. Fielding, whom Marcus had recommended after our separation, whom I later found out shared a racquetball partner with Marcus's father. The report described me as someone with severe attachment disruptions and limited capacity for consistent caregiving. I had never seen that report before the hearing. My own attorney barely had time to challenge it. I lost Noah in 40 minutes. In the months that followed, I fought. I hired a new attorney. I filed motions. I attended every required evaluation, every parenting class, every check-in with the court-appointed monitor. I did everything right. And every time I got close to a new hearing, Marcus's attorney would file another delay, cite another concern, submit another piece of documentation that painted me as someone barely holding herself together. The supervised visits were the worst part. 2 hours every other week, with a woman named Sandra sitting at the corner of a table with a clipboard, watching me read picture books to my own child. Noah would climb into my lap and press his face against my shoulder, and I would hold him and breathe him in and try not to count the minutes. He was 7 when I lost him. By the time of that phone call, he was 8.5. 8-year-olds don't forget their mothers. I knew that. I held on to that. I pulled into the hospital parking lot at 9:47 in the morning. I was through the emergency entrance before my car was fully in park. Noah had been in a car accident. Marcus had been driving him to school when a truck ran a stop sign and hit the passenger side. Noah had a fractured left arm, 2 cracked ribs, and internal bruising. He was conscious, he was medicated, and he was asking for me. That last part, the nurse told me quietly, like it was something she wasn't supposed to say. "He's been asking for you since he came in." By name. "I want my mom. I want my mom. His father told us he weren't." She stopped herself. "He's in room 14. Marcus was standing in the hallway outside room 14 when I turned the corner. He looked the same. Tall, composed, wearing the kind of business casual that always made him look like he was about to give a presentation. He had a small cut above his eyebrow from the accident, but otherwise he looked untouched. He usually did. Claire. He said my name like a warning. "I'm here for Noah. You should have called me first. You can't just..." He asked for me. I kept walking. The hospital called me. He stepped to the side, and I wasn't sure if it was a choice or if something in my face stopped him. I pushed open the door to room 14. Noah was lying in the hospital bed with his arm in a temporary splint. A monitor clicked to his finger. his dark hair pushed back from his forehead. He was small against the white sheets. He turned his head when I came in, and his face did something that broke me open completely. He just said, "Mom," and started to cry. I crossed the room and put my arms around him as carefully as I could. I felt his ribs expand against my hands and remembered to breathe. "I'm here," I said. "I'm right here. You're okay." He held on to me with his good arm and didn't let go for a long time. Dr. Osei came in an hour later to go over Noah's condition and next steps. Marcus had followed me into the room eventually, standing near the window, not saying much. The doctor was a calm, efficient woman who spoke directly and didn't perform anything. I liked her immediately. She explained the injuries, the treatment plan, the timeline for recovery. She said Noah would need to stay for observation for at least 2 days. She said the fracture was clean and would heal well. Then she paused, in the way that doctors pause when they're about to say something that changes the shape of a conversation. "There's something else I need to discuss with both of you," she said. She glanced at Noah, who had fallen into a light sleep, perhaps in the hallway. We stood in the corridor, Marcus on one side, me on the other, Dr. Osei between us. When we ran Noah's blood work this morning, our lab flagged something. We see it sometimes with trauma cases, certain markers that point to an underlying condition we wouldn't ordinarily screen for. She kept her voice even and professional. Noah shows signs consistent with a hereditary clotting disorder called factor V Leiden thrombophilia. It's genetic. It means his blood doesn't clot the way it should under certain conditions, and it increases his risk for complications in situations exactly like the one this morning. I felt the information settle into me like cold water. To confirm the diagnosis and understand the severity, she continued, we need to run genetic panels on both biological parents. It's standard protocol. It tells us what variant he has, which parent it came from, and how to manage his care going forward. Of course, I said immediately. Whatever he needs. I looked at Marcus. He was very still. "Mr. Hartwell?" Dr. Osei said. "Fine," he said. His voice was controlled, but something underneath it had changed. "Fine, yes. We gave blood samples that afternoon. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was focused on Noah, on sitting beside his bed and holding his hand while he slept, on asking the nurses questions about pain management and recovery timelines, on memorizing the sound of his breathing. Marcus came and went. He made calls in the hallway. He brought Noah a burger from across the street that Noah ate 3 bites of before falling asleep again. That night, after visiting hours ended and I was forced to leave, I sat in my car in the parking structure for 40 minutes before I could make myself drive. I had been that close to him. For the first time in 14 months, I had held my son without a clipboard in the room. The results came back on Thursday morning. Dr. Osei asked both of us to come in separately to discuss the findings. I went at 9. She closed the door to her office, sat down across from me, and folded her hands on the desk in a way that told me she had done this before, delivered information that upended something. "Claire," she said, and the use of my first name made me hold very still. "Noah does have factor V Leiden. We confirmed it. It's a single copy variant, which means he inherited it from one parent." "Okay," I said. "Your panel came back negative. You don't carry the variant." I processed that. "So it came from his father." She looked at me carefully. "That's what should have happened, yes. But Marcus Hartwell's panel also came back negative." The room went very quiet. "I don't understand," I said. "Neither variant is present in either of your genetic profiles in a way that could have produced Noah's result through normal inheritance." She paused. "Claire, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to understand that whatever you tell me does not affect Noah's care. It only affects how we proceed medically and administratively." My hands were flat on my thighs. I made myself keep breathing. "Is there any possibility," she said carefully, "that Marcus Hartwell is not Noah's biological father?" The world did not fall apart the way I expected it to. It got very clear, actually. Very specific. I heard the hum of the ventilation system. I heard someone laugh in the corridor outside. No, I said. There is no possibility of that. I want to make sure you understand what the genetic results are showing us. I understand what you're telling me, and I'm telling you that I was faithful to Marcus throughout our entire marriage. Noah is his son. I stopped. Something shifted in my chest. A slow, mechanical turn, like a lock opening from the inside. Unless, I thought about Dr. Fielding's report, the one I had never seen before the custody hearing. The one that described me in language I didn't recognize as myself, detached, erratic, incapable. I thought about the year before the separation, when Marcus had taken Noah to visit his parents in Columbus for a long weekend and come back with a different energy, quieter, more deliberate. I had assumed he was tired. I had assumed a lot of things. Can you run a paternity test? I asked. A formal one. Through this hospital. We can refer you to a certified lab. Given the medical necessity of understanding Noah's genetic profile, there may be grounds for an expedited result. Please, I said. Please do that. I didn't tell Marcus I had requested the test. I went home and I sat with what I knew and what I didn't know, and I tried to build a shape out of it. Marcus had come into our marriage with a son he clearly adored. He had been a good father when Noah was small. I had to hold on to that truth, even now. But in the years before our separation, something had changed in him. He had become controlling in ways so gradual I barely noticed them at first. He started attending my therapy appointments for support, and then started requesting meetings with my therapist alone. He monitored my phone. He told me gently, repeatedly, that I was struggling more than I realized, that I needed more help than I was getting, that Noah needed stability, and stability meant structure, and structure meant Marcus making the decisions. I had believed him for longer than I should have. The paternity results came back in 8 days. Dr. Osei called me personally. She did not do this over the phone with me. She asked me to come in. The genetic results are conclusive, she said. Marcus Hartwell is not Noah's biological father. I had been bracing for it. I still felt the floor shift. The probability of paternity is 0, she continued. This is not ambiguous. The markers are definitive. That's not possible, I said, and I heard how hollow it sounded. I was never with anyone else. I believe you, she said. And the way she said it, not gently, not carefully, but directly, made me look up at her face. What are you saying? I'm not in a position to speculate, she said, but I can tell you that in situations like this, we are required to flag certain inconsistencies. The hospital has a protocol, and I've already been in contact with someone I think you should speak with. She slid a business card across the desk. The name on the card was Special Agent Dara Kowalski. Below the name, FBI, Healthcare Fraud Division. I went to see Agent Kowalski the following morning. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s, with reading glasses pushed up onto her head and a manner that was brisk without being cold. She had a file on her desk when I walked in. It was thicker than I expected. Ms. Hartwell, she said, thank you for coming in. I want to be transparent with you about why you're here, because I think you deserve that. She explained it carefully. The FBI had been running a separate investigation for the past 7 months into a network of family court consultants, psychologists, and documentation preparers operating in 3 Ohio counties. The investigation centered on the manipulation of psychological evaluation reports used in custody cases, specifically the inflation of negative findings against one parent in exchange for payment by the other. Dr. Fielding was on their list. We've been building this case for a while, she said. Your case came up in our review of his client records. The evaluation he submitted in your custody hearing, we have reason to believe it was substantially altered from his original notes. I sat with that for a moment. He changed the report, I said. We believe someone paid him too. We believe the individual who arranged that payment also arranged for certain other documentation in your case to be, she chose her next word deliberately, adjusted. Marcus. She didn't confirm or deny. I need to ask you some questions about your son's genetic results. Are you aware that Marcus Hartwell recently increased the value of his life insurance policy, listing Noah as the sole beneficiary? No. Are you aware that Marcus Hartwell has been in contact with a private genetic testing facility in Cincinnati over the past 2 years? Not a hospital lab. A private facility. Something cold moved through me. What kind of contact? I asked. She opened the file and turned a page toward me. It was a series of financial records, payment receipts. The facility's name was listed clearly. So was the date of the first payment, 3 months before our custody hearing. We believe, Agent Kowalski said slowly, that Marcus Hartwell had prior knowledge that he was not Noah's biological father. And we believe that rather than pursue a paternity test through legitimate channels, which would have affected the custody case significantly, he chose to pursue other options. What other options? She looked at me over her glasses. We're still building that part of the case, she said. But I want you to know that the psychological report that was used against you in your custody hearing is now part of a federal investigation, and that changes things considerably for your legal situation. I called my attorney from the parking lot. She picked up on the second ring. I have something, I said. I have everything. The next 3 months were not simple. Nothing about it was clean or fast or cinematic. There were depositions and motions and phone calls that lasted until midnight. There were days when I sat in my attorney's office going through documents until my eyes stopped focusing. There were days when I cried in my car in parking lots again, but for different reasons this time. Marcus's attorney filed 4 separate motions to delay the emergency custody review. All 4 were denied. Dr. Fielding surrendered his license in a negotiated agreement with the state board. He was named in the federal investigation along with 2 other psychologists and a documentation service that operated out of a shared office in Kettering. The FBI's investigation eventually implicated 11 cases across 3 counties. Mine was one of them. The genetic evidence was perhaps the strangest piece of everything. It turned out that Marcus had discovered, through that private lab in Cincinnati, that he was not Noah's biological father approximately 2 years into our marriage. He had said nothing. He had not confronted me, because, I believe, he knew the truth would have clarified things in my favor. Instead, he had made a calculation. He had spent the following years building a case around my instability, gathering observations, recommending therapists, positioning himself as the stable parent, the responsible one, the one Noah needed. All of it assembled carefully over years in preparation for a moment he had clearly decided was inevitable. What he had not accounted for was a car accident and a doctor who ran the right blood work. The emergency custody hearing was held 6 weeks after my meeting with Agent Kowalski. I sat at the table with my attorney on one side and a representative from the guardian ad litem's office on the other. Marcus sat across from us, quieter than I had ever seen him. His lead attorney had withdrawn from the case 2 weeks prior. The judge, a different judge from the original hearing, a woman with gray-streaked hair and a reputation for reading every page of every file, reviewed the FBI documentation, the genetic results, the affidavit from Dr. Fielding's former associate, and the independent psychological evaluation I had undergone 3 months prior from a certified evaluator with no connection to anyone in my case. She looked at me over the top of her glasses for a long moment before she spoke. "Ms. Bass, Hartwell," she said, "it is the finding of this court that the original custody determination was based on materially false and fraudulent documentation. The order granting sole custody to Marcus Hartwell is hereby vacated, effective immediately." I heard the words. I understood them. And I still had to press my hand flat against the table to stay in my chair. Noah came home to me on a Friday afternoon in November. He walked through the front door of my apartment carrying a backpack and a stuffed dog he'd had since he was 4 that he called Captain, and he stood in the living room for a moment and looked around at everything, the bookshelf I had put his picture books on, the hooks by the door with his name on a little wooden plaque, the drawing he'd made for me in 1st grade that I had kept in a frame on the refrigerator the entire 14 months he was gone. He walked over to the refrigerator and looked at the drawing. "You still have it," he said. "I always had it." He turned around and looked at me with that serious expression he sometimes got, the one that made him look older than he was, that made me wonder what he had seen and heard in the months we were apart. "Mom," he said, "I told Dad I wanted to live with you. Before the accident, I told him a lot of times. I crouched down so we were eye level. "I know, baby." He said, "You weren't ready." He frowned at the floor, then back at me. "But you were always ready. You came every time." I pulled him in and held him the way I had been holding on to the thought of him for 14 months, carefully, completely, like something I was never going to put down again. "Yes," I said. "I was always ready." Marcus pled guilty to fraud and obstruction charges 6 months later as part of a negotiated agreement. He lost parental rights through a separate family court proceeding. The judge in that proceeding noted in her written ruling that the pattern of behavior demonstrated over multiple years represented a deliberate and sustained effort to deprive a child of his relationship with a fit and loving parent. The question of Noah's biological father, the real one, took time to untangle. His name was Derek. We had dated briefly before Marcus, before any of this, before I knew what any of my choices would cost me. He lived in Portland now. He had a family. When I reached out, he was stunned, and then quiet, and then careful in the way that people are when the ground shifts under them without warning. We had a long phone call. We agreed to go slowly. We agreed that Noah's needs came first, always. We agreed to be decent to each other, which felt, after everything, like an extraordinary luxury. Noah started 3rd grade in January and made a best friend named Tomas, who lived 2 blocks away and shared his obsession with building things out of cardboard. He went to therapy every other week with a woman named Dr. Park, who had a fish tank in her waiting room and let him name all the fish. He slept in his own room with his nightlight shaped like a crescent moon and his stuffed dog Captain and a stack of chapter books he was working through at a pace that made his teacher send home cheerful notes. He asked me once on a Sunday morning over pancakes whether I had been scared. During all of it, he said, "Were you scared?" I thought about the courtroom, the parking lots, the Tuesday morning phone call, the way his face had looked in room 14 when I walked through the door. "Yes," I said, "every single day." He chewed his pancake and considered this. "But you kept coming," he said. "I kept coming." He nodded slowly, like this answered something he had needed confirmed. Then he reached over and stole a piece of bacon off my plate with complete shamelessness, and I let him, and we sat together in the morning light of our ordinary kitchen, in our ordinary life, which was the most extraordinary thing I had ever had.